Hold up. Something's not right here. With a confusing video title like that, I suppose I'd better have a pretty good and intriguing theory to justify the cryptic headline, right? Well, fear not, for the theory I'm telling you all about today is intriguing, good, and that little bit crazy. The kind of crazy that makes you wonder if I took a Josh Johnson kick to the head. Unlike some theories though, I feel I've got a good array of hard-hitting evidence that backs up my claim. Enough stalling! Get to it already! Alright. The theory I have revolves around the Forza series of games and one specific car. The 2013 SRT Viper GTS that's been in the franchise since it was a DLC car in Forza Motorsport 4, which was 9 years ago now. Technically 10, but 9 years since the car has been in the game. I remember seeing the DLC trailer for the car in-game the same day the real car came out and was ecstatic that my favorite car was going to be in the racing game I wanted the most. I fell in love with the Forza franchise the moment I watched the E3 trailer with the Kanye West song Power. It fits so well with the in-game footage being displayed that Forza Motorsport 4 was the must-have game of the century for me back then. It also helped massively that the then new Viper was going to be in the game. What I couldn't have known back then was that the Viper I wanted to drive so desperately and continue to put the most miles on even today wasn't exactly what I thought it was. Let me show you why. Oddity number 1, the TFT screen. On the production Gen 5 Vipers, there was a little design element surrounding the rev counter that separates it from the menu on the left and the oil pressure on the right, acting as a centerpiece for the rev counter Easter egg where the Viper logo glows red when you're close to redline. You can see it clearly in the gameplay and in the still photo because it's painted in a gold-like color. Normally it'd be kind of gray. The car in that photo and in the gameplay footage is the 2016 Dodge Viper ACR, hence why the centerpiece is gold. By comparison, below is footage and a photo of the 2013 SRT Viper GTS. Noticeable difference, huh? If you know your Gen 5 Vipers, then this omission is a glaring one when you drive around, however briefly, in the cockpit view. It's almost like the GTS predicted that modern cars would do less and less to hide the fact that they have digital instrumentation, opting completely for there's a digital gauge cluster, what of it look, as compared to the ACR's more stylized appearance. Where the GTS goes for a modern, and in my opinion lazy, look of just placing a screen in the center of the dash full stop, the ACR has the courtesy of trying to liven it up a little. Observant viewers will also notice that the aspect ratio of the screen in the GTS isn't quite right. When you look at the two back to back, it's clear that the GTS's screen has stretched graphics. Not only are they too wide, but I've also realized that the GTS's graphics are shorter in height. When you look at the ACR, the graphics are thinner and taller, fitting neatly into the gauge cluster design element. Those two discrepancies alone prove, in my mind, that this Viper isn't all that it's cracked up to be. That is to say, it's not a production version of the car, and it might not even be a pre-production version either. No other production Gen 5 Viper lacks such a small but crucial design element. Furthermore, there are two other gauges that are missing from the 13 Viper's display, one of them being volts and the other being oil temperature. And if I'm really nitpicking, the UI design on the oil pressure gauge isn't even the same as it is on the production car. Some of you might have also noticed that the text miles per hour is in the wrong place. This appears to be an error on the developer side though, turn 10. As, from images I've gathered, even the car I believe the in-game 13 GTS to be doesn't have the miles per hour text in that spot. At this point, you might be wondering if all of that is a result of hardware limitations due to the 13 Viper being introduced back when the Xbox 360 was still alive and kicking. However, this is not the case, and I've got two examples to support that. The first example is this photo right here. Originally coming from Road and Track, you can see there's a little red and white arrow pointing to the gauge cluster. If you look hard enough, the seam between the normal dash and the digital gauge cluster is clearly visible. On production Gen 5s, that seam doesn't exist, as where the seam would be is covered by the design element we've been talking about. Little side note here, little sidebar. That lack of the design element in the gauge cluster is actually visible in FCA/Stellantis photos, so it's not just me like cherry picking images around the internet. No, the lack of this design element is visible in even official photos for the car. For the second example, I knew I would have to find a car with a similar gauge cluster design that didn't lose any detail because of hardware limitations, which, perhaps ironically, led me to look at another V10 supercar, the Lexus LFA. Looking at the dash display, I'm not seeing anything missing from the real car. The Forza devs even went as far as to put the car in sport mode and model the gauge cluster after that, rather than model the cluster in its normal mode. Just to prove I'm not leaving anything out either, the little light rings surrounding the rev counter even light up when it's dark out. Oddity number 2, the ride height. That picture is the ride height of the 2013 SRT Viper GTS. Supercars are supposed to be low, but don't you think that the space between the front wheel and the hood is a little too low? Even for a supercar? The overall ride height is suspicious too, but the front end is where it's most obvious. For comparison, here's a bone stock 2016 Dodge Viper ACR from my inventory. Do you see the difference? It might take a few minutes looking between the two, but it should become evident that the red car is definitely too low. And yes, saying a supercar is too low might sound like an oxymoron, but let me show you the pre-production car for an additional comparison. See it? The whole car rides a little bit higher than the 13 GTS I showed you earlier. Even the gap between the rear wheel and the fender is bigger on the pre-production car. Don't think I cheated by using cars with different wheels in the press photos either. The Sidewinder 2 Track Pack/TA wheels are the same size front to back as the Venom GTS and or GT wheels. 18-inch wheels up front for 295 section tires and 19-inch wheels out back for 355 tires in the rear. Oddity number 3, the carbon fiber. Oh yes, you know something must be up if I'm even mentioning the carbon fiber as a sign that something isn't quite right. On the production Gen 5, there's an option to get the rear taillight surround and the front brake duct finished in carbon fiber, rather than the standard black finish. However, the 13 GTS that's in-game even has the rear diffuser finished in carbon fiber, something not done on production versions of the car. For comparison, let's look at the 16 ACR again and the IRL pre-production car. Even Dodge themselves said that the exterior carbon fiber package only added carbon fiber to the front brake ducts, the rear brake/differential duct, and the rear taillight surround, what they call an applique. Nowhere in the photo below is it mentioned that it also changes the finish on the diffuser from pure black to carbon fiber. Before I continue though, I need to be completely transparent. The rear brake/diff cooler on the 13 GTS and Forza games is not finished in carbon fiber. I don't know why that is when you take into account the rear applique, the diffuser of all things, and the front brake ducts are finished in carbon fiber. Seems like a bit of an oversight. I even double and triple checked in that area on the 13 GTS, but couldn't find a single hint of a carbon fiber weave. Amusingly, the 16 ACR, which has the exterior carbon fiber package, does have carbon fiber in that area. So what does all this mean? If this isn't a pre-production or production Viper, then what Viper is it? I'm glad you asked. My belief is that this car is the New York show car. Everything we've seen from the in-game 13 GTS is present in the New York show car, from the lack of the gauge cluster design element to the carbon fiber diffuser to even the lower than normal ride height. This car has all the oddities of the in-game GTS. Here's a few photos in conjunction with the one shown earlier so you can see just how similar the 13 GTS is to the New York City show car. Okay, I can see what you're on about. Here's my question though. Why is this Viper so different then? Once again, I am glad you asked. To explain why the show car is so different from pre- and post-production examples, we have to read a few paragraphs from a specific book. In this book, written by Maurice Liang and titled SRT Viper, America's Supercar Returns, there is a section that talks about the NYC show car, and below is a quote from the book itself. In 2011, Steve Sharples had a problem. When to unveil the new Viper? Production of the 2013 Viper was scheduled to begin in the fourth quarter of 2012. Although the North American International Auto Show in Detroit in January 2012 would be the perfect venue to introduce the 5th generation Viper, since it would mark the 20th anniversary of the launch of the original Viper RT10. It would steal all of the attention away from the important new Dodge Dart reveal. The Los Angeles Auto Show in November 2012 would be too late. By then, the car would be in production. That left the New York Auto Show in April of 2012 as the only choice. There was just one problem. The first prototype cars wouldn't begin production until mid-April, too late for the New York show. The only solution was to build a one-off show car that looked like a production car, says Sharples. Concept cars only have to look good on the outside, explains Sharples, and most of the time, they only have to run enough to move them on and off the stage. The reveal car was going to be used for PR and magazine photography, for auto show duty, and, most importantly, would be under the intense scrutiny of potential buyers. It had to look, sound, and smell like the real thing. The task of building the show car went to Prestige Group, a company Chrysler had used in the past to build show cars. Starting with a Gen 4 SRT10 convertible, Prestige stripped the car down to the bare frame and rebuilt it to look like a Gen 5 Viper. Since even prototype parts were still a long way off, Prestige had to custom make every visual part that was different on the Gen 5, outside, inside, even under the hood. Outside of the hilarious fact that they managed to fool everyone and give a Gen 4 a new lease on life as a Gen 5 show car, those dates are also particularly important. I did some searches on YouTube and Google to find the earliest possible article of a Gen 5 being tested and the earliest possible video of the car in-game, Forza Motorsport 4 specifically. The dates worked out like this. The earliest possible article about the real car being tested was posted on September 9th, 2012. Some videos from that date and event can also be found. The earliest possible video about the 13 Viper GTS showing up in Forza Motorsport 4 was posted on July 22nd, 2012. In the previously cited book, it's mentioned that the show car had to be finished by the end of February. While what I'm about to say is purely opinion, I think it checks out. Here's what I believe the rough chain of events were. Prestige finished the car by the end of February. March rolls around and Turn 10 approached Chrysler about putting the new Viper in Forza Motorsport 4. They oblige, and Turn 10 get to work. Less than a month later, they've done just enough work to quickly pump out a trailer for the car to appear during the actual reveal, showcasing that it will also make an appearance in Forza Motorsport 4. 3 months later, May, June, and the 22nd of July, the car makes a full appearance in Forza Motorsport 4 as a DLC car. That's important because had Turn 10 decided to use the first prototype cars, which wouldn't be produced until mid-April, the chain of events might have looked more like this. Turn 10 begins working on the car in mid to late April. Make a trailer for the car in May. 3 months of work later, August, the car makes a full appearance in Forza Motorsport 4. What would have happened a short while later, assuming everything went exactly the same? Those articles and videos detailing the first ever drive of the new Viper would have went live on September 9th. That didn't happen though. In our timeline, if you want to think of it like that, Turn 10 worked on the Gen 5 early and released it early, creating a discrepancy between when the car was introduced into Forza and when the first prototypes or first pre-production models were finished and tested. There's no other way they could have done that without using the New York show car because there weren't any other Gen 5s in existence at that time. Certainly none that looked as production ready or finished as the show car. thus explaining why the in-game car has a lot of its parts and ride height. It was the only car Chrysler would let Turn 10 use because at that time, it was the only one they had that looked ready enough to be utilized. All of that, to me, is irrefutable evidence that the 2013 SRT Viper GTS that we know and love in the Forza franchise isn't the car we think it is. It isn't a pre-production car, and it sure as hell isn't a production car. It is, in my opinion, mostly related to the New York City show car that was unveiled back in 2012. As I said earlier, the in-game car has the same or similar ride height, it lacks the gauge cluster detail, the rev counter is too wide and short, and there's too much carbon fiber. None of which is true of production examples of this car. The only place I can see where the NYC car and the in-game car differ is in the material of the brake/differential cooling duct, where it's purely black, as opposed to the carbon fiber of the show car. Again, a weird change from the show car considering Forza even went as far as modeling the diffuser in carbon fiber, something that, again, isn't part of the exterior carbon fiber package. It's also kind of funny how the only, for a while, Gen 5 Viper we got in the game was, technically speaking, a rebuilt Gen 4 made to look like a Gen 5. Who would have thought, right? As is often said though, truth is stranger than fiction. There you have it though, folks. That is my theory explaining why I believe the 2013 SRT Viper GTS we've had in Forza for almost a decade now isn't the real deal. Do you think I'm onto something, or do you think I've completely lost it? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please make sure to like, comment, share, and consider subscribing. And if you do subscribe, hey, I really appreciate that. Please make sure you hit the little notification bell and then all notifications. That way you'll be notified every time I upload. Stay tuned for much more Viper Week content.